Hi there and welcome back to Station Road. Now today is the big day of the competition and revealing who is going to be the winner of these two kits. So as you recall, we had the Metcalfe Brewery kit, and then I added the factory and boiler house kit as well. Now we had 106 entries in total, which was absolutely fantastic. So thank you everyone who submitted an entry for the brewery name. And out of that 106, I chose the top 10 names. Now, the curious aspect to this is there's actually 11 names going into this hat because one of the top 10 names that I chose came up twice. So that means there is 11 names, two the same, but from two separate entries. Now, the curious thing is it was the only name that actually came up twice. So out of that 106 entries, every single name, bar one, was unique and completely different. So that I actually found quite extraordinary. So before we get into the actual draw itself, and I've got the names all stacked up behind me here, I just thought I'd like to go through some of the other really unusual names. Unfortunately, the ones that didn't end up in the top 10, but I thought just for curiosity's sake, some might like to hear some very peculiar, well, maybe not peculiar, but quite comical names. So we had Shaky Ales. So that obviously is the play on Shaky Isles, and of course for many of you will know that yes, New Zealand is known for its earthquakes, so, and also actually Christchurch. So yes, Shaky Ales, very, very entertaining indeed. We had Tipsy. This was actually entered by one of my subscribers' sons who thought that would be a good idea, and it is a good idea because yes, beer does make you tipsy. We had Punt Love. Now this has some unusual history behind it. I haven't got it in front of me, but some people might connect with that straight away, and it's quite interesting. We had Hammered, so another alcohol related name, so quite interesting there. These are actually all alcohol related, to be quite honest. We had Swills and Nail, which is a play on words. It was quite entertaining, and one of my favourites actually, but these unfortunately didn't end up in the top 10, was Migraine. So that itself, Mygraine, was quite an entertaining name. And yes, at my age, if I have a few too many beers, I will end up with a migraine. So some of the funny entries that came in. Now let's get into the actual draw itself. So what I've actually done here is I've got 11 cards with names on them, and we will go through each one of them with a little bit of a history and a background. Fortunately, most of these entries, they actually provided a little bit of background behind the name. So that's absolutely great. Thank you so much for those who did that. I also did a bit of research as well. So there are a selection of fictional names, and there's also some names that were submitted that are actually relating to existing breweries or breweries that existed in the past in the UK. So there we have it, and we will put them all in this hat as we go. So the first of the top 10 names that came in is Middleton Brewery. So this is a big thank you to Gerald Blaney who submitted this name, and it has a bit of a curious background actually, for a couple of reasons. The reason one, which was actually a little bit of history or information that Gerald actually provided in his email. Well, apparently there are many Middleton names around the UK, and I would completely understand that. But also, apparently, the Metcalfe family name is thought to originate from the Calf Top Summit on Middleton Fell in the Yorkshire Dales. So that is actually quite curious in itself. Now, the other curious aspect to this name is that some time ago I actually did a video on a very large layout here in New Zealand called Middleton Model Railway, and it is actually being built and run by a chap by the name of Colin, who originally is from Yorkshire in the UK. So it just made sense that this name had to be in the top 10. So thank you, Gerald, for that. In the hat it goes. Now, the next name, which is quite curious, is Rig Welters. And I hope I'm actually pronounced that correctly. This is from Stephen Pike, so thank you for your entry. And this actually has a very curious background to it as well. So apparently it's based on an old Yorkshire dialect word, rig welted, which apparently means an upturned sheep. So I find that absolutely fascinating. And apparently it has been coined by Yorkshire's Black Sheep Brewery, which is based in Masham, I hope I'm pronouncing things right, which is to infer a strong beer that can quickly have you on your back if you are not careful. So there we go. So it was definitely a worthy entry for the top 10. So thank you for that, Stephen. In the hat again. So the next name to go into the hat is Brixton. Now this comes to us from Jason Griffiths, who's actually Barnabas Junction. So thank you for your entry. And the reason I've chosen this name, two reasons actually. And firstly, Brixton is actually a brewery, quite a young brewery, based in Brixton, obviously, South London. But when it first began in 2013, it established itself underneath a railway arch. So there we have that. Now, the other reason is Brixton. It sort of sounds like bricks, and of course, with our Metcalfe kits being predominantly brick, I kind of felt it reasonably poignant and connected to the brewery. So there is Brixton going into the hat, and thank you, Jason, for that. So the next name to be entered into the top 10 is Morehouse. Now this has come to us from Lee Holden, so thank you, Lee, for submitting this entry. Now Lee, you're probably thinking, well, hold on a minute, that wasn't actually the name. Now, Lee actually entered a name called Barleymore, but in his email description, he said it is based on a village of Barley at the foothold of the Pendle Hill and the local brewery, Morehouse. So I actually found that the actual brewery that you mentioned and its name, Morehouse, was actually quite curious, because here in Christchurch, New Zealand, Morehouse is actually quite a common name, and there's actually a main avenue here in Christchurch called Morehouse Avenue. So I just instantly felt the connection with that. So Morehouse is in the entry, and in a roundabout way, even though it wasn't your intended name, I've certainly taken the name from the email. So there we have it. Morehouse goes into the hat. Now the next one is quite a curious one in actually how the name came about. So we have Downey. Now this comes to us from James Dine, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Now James is actually from Charleston, South Carolina. So hello, South Carolina. Now the interesting aspect behind this name is that he actually looked up my name and its Latin origins, and from those origins the interpretational meaning for my name, as in Julian, means youthful or downy. So there we go, it's probably why I look so youthful. But I really like the connection that you have actually made there, James. So it is definitely in the top 10. So thank you very much for that. Now, this is the name that ended up being entered in twice. So out of all that 106 entries, this name only came in twice by 2 separate entries. And this particular entry is from James Braxton. So thank you, James, for submitting this. Now, this is a very, very significant name here in Christchurch, because Christchurch is actually based in the region of Canterbury here in New Zealand. And also here in Christchurch there is a beer, or was a beer, I'm actually not quite sure, called Canterbury Draft. So this is why I really felt that this name had to go into the hat. Now, there is another person who will come up shortly who also entered this name, so this is why there is 11 cards going into the hat. So thank you, James, for your entry. Into the hat it goes. Now, the next one here, this has some fascinating history behind it. And this has come to us from Chris Walker. So thank you, Chris, for your entry. We have Fremlin's. So apparently this is a brewery, and this is a real brewery that existed. I'm not sure, I don't think it exists any longer, but it was a real brewery based in Maidstone, Kent, and it was established by Ralph Fremlin in the 1860s. Now, the reason he established this brewery is because he was rather askew of the pub trade and decided to focus on bottled beer. And this was all based on religious grounds. So, interestingly enough, whether he might have been a man of the cloth or possibly a monk or something like that, was his religious orders banning him from having a beer at the local pub. So he decided to go and bottle his own. Now, the original brewery was founded in Earl Street, Maidstone, and from what I understand now, the whole place is completely levelled and has become quite a nice sort of shopping centre and so forth. And this was but the original brewery was established in 1790, so it goes back quite a way. It was apparently bought out by Whitbread in the 1960s, but then I think all the sites had closed by the 1980s. So a fascinating history behind Fremlin's, and one of the key reasons why this name had to be in the top 10. So thank you, Chris, for that. Now the next name, which is quite an interesting name because it connects with the actual layout where my brewery is, and it is Bridgegate. Now, this has been submitted by Penn Junction. Now, hello Penn Junction. Unfortunately, you didn't actually put your name, so I don't know who you actually are. And I tried to locate whether you might have been a YouTube channel or a Facebook group, but I didn't have much luck. So, but Penn Junction, thank you for entering this name. And we can see the connection because my brewery on the Station Road layout is actually sandwiched between two bridges, one being a rail overhead bridge and the other one being a road overhead bridge. So it all really makes quite obvious sense that Bridgegate be quite an appropriate name for the brewery. So thank you, Penn Junction, for that entry, and into the hat it goes. Now, this is the second Canterbury entry. We'll just quickly put this up here, and once again, as I previously described about the connections with Canterbury, and this comes to us from Todd Lewis. So thank you, Todd, for your entry of the name Canterbury, and in the hat it goes. Now, this has a couple of connections. That has the UK connection, but it also has a New Zealand connection as well, and this is Whitaker's. Now, this comes to us from John Rushworth, so thank you so much, John, for submitting this entry. it apparently is a defunct Yorkshire brewery. So I will have to do a little bit of research, I think, about this, which I haven't actually done. But the other interesting aspect to this name is here in New Zealand, Whittaker's is a very well known and well respected chocolate brand. So in my eyes, I believe that Whittaker's here in New Zealand make the best chocolate in New Zealand. And the other interesting aspect about Whittaker's chocolate is that for some years, Nigella Lawson, the UK chef, was the brand ambassador for Whittaker's chocolate. So there we have it. Of course, the chocolate doesn't relate to the beer really in any way. It's just the name. So, but definitely a top 10 worthy entry. So into the hat it goes. And the final name is a existing brewery, or it was an existing brewery. I'm not sure whether it still operates, and this comes to us from Mike Webb. So thank you, Mike, for submitting this entry, and a little bit of history around Allsops. And it's really kind of the history of some of these names that really sort of fascinate me. Now this is a brewery that was based on High Street, Burton-on-Trent in Staffordshire. And the history of the actual company goes all the way back to the 1740s. So wow, there's a bit of history there. But it was apparently around the 1800s that Samuel Allsop joined the company. And apparently Samuel Allsop is credited as being the first brewer to export Burton Pale Ale to India in 1822. So fancy that. 200 years ago, Samuel Allsop was exporting beer to India. So that is absolutely fascinating. So that is the final name into the hat, and a very worthy entry. So thank you for that, Mike. So we've now got all the entries into the hat, 11 cards in here, 2 of course which have the same name, Canterbury. So let us see who is going to win these fantastic card kits, and also nervously find out what is going to actually end up on my brewery. Give them a good shuffle. What's it going to be? What are we going to end up with on my brewery? Now, I won't deny the fact that I possibly might have a few favourites in here, but I'm taking the risk and nervously anticipating the name that will end up on the chimney of the brewery and also on the main structure of the building. So I think that's enough shuffling. We are going to go, I'm going to turn that one up, and we are going to pull this one out from under here, and we're just going to sandwich it between my hands. And in here is the name for the brewery. And well, what do we have? We have Allsops. So, well, Mike Webb, thank you very much for your entry, and thank you for this name. So Allsops is going to end up on my brewery, and it is a very worthy name to have on the brewery. Now, Mike, this is what you've won, and I hope you enjoy these. I will be in contact with you via email to get your address details and so forth, so we can get these sent out to you. So there we have it. Thank you to everyone who submitted entries, and thank you to those who ended up in the top 10. They were all fantastic names, and it will be interesting though to see Allsops on the brewery. Now, I will actually do a video on this in the not too distant future, hopefully, because there will be an interesting technique on how I get the name onto the chimney, because I do want it to be a ghosted name I don't, I sort of want it to be a little bit worn out and a bit faded, as they often got. So I've got to figure out a suitable technique of how to do that, and also be able to do that with being able to choose a font, a suitable typeface for that project. So once again, thank you everyone for entering into the competition. Absolutely fantastic entries, and I will leave it there for now and catch you in the next video. Bye for now.